Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink. We have a special treat for you this week. Fred Glass, former Indiana University athletics director and author of a new book, Making Your Own Luck, From a Skid Row Bar to Rebuilding Indiana University Athletics. Fred, welcome to the show. It's good to talk to you on this Thursday morning.
Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate you having me on. Very kind of you.
So, as I mentioned to you before I hit record, I did get a chance to comb through some of the book, and there's a lot obviously in there about your time at Indiana. But one of the things that really struck me, and I guess I didn't have a great understanding of, because, you know, when I first started covering IU basketball was back in 2007, so just a little bit before the time you came onto the job. But based on how you tell it in the book, it was very unlikely that you became IU athletic director, just kind of how the process went and your mindset kind of going into it. You know, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what you wrote in the book, it didn't seem like you had a ton of confidence that, you know, you obviously wanted to pursue the job, but you weren't necessarily sure that the outcome was going to be that you were going to be the athletic director. What was your mindset kind of entering that interview process? And you obviously took a step down in salary and other things to come to IU to do that job. What made it such an appealing position for you to pursue?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me on, Alex. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to nose through the book a little bit. So I've always been an IU fan. You know, grew up an IU fan. My mom was a big IU person, watched all the games. You know, I was always all in, but I never thought about being an athletic director or anything like that. And when Greenspan left, you know, I was interested in that as a fan, but never gave it a second thought about anything I'd be interested in. And then I started talking to the search committee. At first, I thought it was crazy, and I sort of dismissed it. But then I thought, well, this could be cool, because I've always been a staff guy. In politics, I was a staff guy behind the scenes. As a lawyer, you're a staff guy. And this was an opportunity to actually run something which appealed to me. And something that you run is IU sports, Bloomington, kids. I mean, what could be better than that? So I got excited about it and decided to pursue it. And then I found out that the only direction that President McRobbie gave to the search committee was, you've got to hire somebody who's been a sitting AD, because I got to have somebody that knows what they're doing. So by his single criterion, I was ineligible, you know, but I was undeterred because I thought I had something to offer. And I still remember going into the search committee meeting, this big, gigantic corporate table inside Bankers Life Fieldhouse or whatever it is now. And all these big poobahs there, you know, Jerry Yeagley, the Godfather, Jim Morris, Mr. IU, other coaches, community leaders. And it was very intimidating, you know, but I knew what I wanted to say. And I said it all. And a lot of what I said ended up being really what we tried to focus on: rebuilding facilities, focusing on football as a revenue generator, focusing on the student experience, et cetera. But nobody asked me about not having any experience, you know. So it was possible, I suppose, that I was so awesome that they just decided they weren't worried about experience. But more likely, this was like a courtesy interview, and they had disqualified me as not having the thing that President McRobbie had told them that he wanted to have. So as they were winding up the meeting and getting ready to, you know, escort me out, I said, "Hey, wait, you guys, time out. You know, nobody's asked me about the moose on the table. Nobody's asked me about my lack of experience. And I'd like the opportunity to talk about that a little bit." And I had what I wanted to say about that, why I thought I was the, ironically, perhaps low risk, high reward candidate. You know, I was a lifelong IU guy, committed to IU. I wasn't trying to polish my credentials, make some short-term wins that may or may not be good long-term, and then go off to some other school. I was going to live in Indiana, you know, after I was AD, while I was AD, and I was going to literally live with my decisions. And then I thought I had some background for it. Being a lawyer, yes, but also rebuilding infrastructure in Indianapolis I think having a reputation as a bridge builder, figuratively as well as literally, and just made the case. And afterwards, I'm told that the president's chief of staff called the president and said Fred Glass just blew the room apart, which I took as a good sign. And I think was a pivotal point of people taking me more seriously as a credible candidate. And with the support of Steve Ferguson on the board of trustees and ultimately the president, I ended up getting a gig, and it was awesome. I loved every day of it.
You mentioned the Kelvin Sampson debacle in your book a little bit as kind of a motivation for wanting to be involved with IU athletics and kind of right the ship of IU basketball, because like it or not, IU basketball is a huge part of the program. I mean, I think one great thing that you did as athletic director is you made it about 24 sports. And I think you did a great job of making everybody feel included. But I think for those of us in the media, when we look at IU athletics, if IU basketball isn't in a healthy place or in a place that's, climbing upward, we can't look at the whole department and say this is a success, because, that's in many ways what people look at as IU's flagship athletic program. So when you watched the Kelvin Sampson, I guess it's fair to call it a debacle, play out from afar as an IU fan, what were you thinking at that time? And I'm also curious, just now with the knowledge that you have of IU athletics after being involved with it so long, why do you think there was so much turnover in your position before you ultimately got there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it implicates a whole bunch of stuff. Let me take a couple parts of it. So I do think 24 sports, one team was really important in terms of rebuilding the esprit de corps and the camaraderie and the culture of the department, as well as, making a lot of progress in those sports. And I'm proud of what happened, in those sports, whether it's baseball dominating the Big Ten or swimming and diving, reestablishing itself as one of the premier programs of the country, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I also get it, right? So as I say in the book, I believe football was the biggest opportunity in the department, because you can't have a strong athletic department without a strong football program, both because of perception and the reality of butts and seats and the revenues that generates for the entire program. And so I unabashedly focus a lot on football and feel like between the investments and the personnel and the culture and all that, got that on a good trajectory. But while football was the biggest opportunity, like I say in basketball, or say in the book, basketball is the most important opportunity. I get it. I know probably some of your listeners think I don't get it, because I talk about 24 sports, one team, all that stuff. But I absolutely got it, get it, that basketball is the most important piece of the puzzle. And everything's better when basketball wins, not just in the athletic department, but in coffee shops, barber shops, country clubs, halls of the General Assembly. I mean, it's in our blood, man. And so the importance of IU basketball really can't be overstated. And I get that. And so at the same time, we were trying to build the whole department and take advantage of what I thought was a big opportunity in football. In my view, and reasonable people can disagree about this, but I felt like we spared no expense in basketball. I was criticized for our budget for recruiting to be the biggest in the country. Our spending on recruiting was the biggest in the country. We put a lot more money in our coaches' salaries, a lot more money in assistant coaches' salaries. We rebuilt Assembly Hall. While Cook Hall was on its way, it hadn't been paid for. So one of the things I had to do was raise the money to pay for Cook Hall. I don't want that to sound defensive. I just say it because I understood that and felt like I proceeded consistent with that understanding. Now, people can decide, well, you should have hired this guy, you should have hired that guy, and you should have fired this guy. And that's what makes it fun, right? Because it's the hot stove topic of conversation. But I don't think we can be fairly criticized for not having made the investments to try to get us where we wanted to be. When I was watching the Kelvin Sampson thing, I think like most Hoosiers, the devastating part of that was, I think generally IU fans will give you a break if they expect excellence and they should get excellence, but they'll give you a break if you're doing things right. And with Kelvin Sampson, it's factual that he was cheating, and we like to think we don't cheat at Indiana. We don't cheat at Indiana. And he didn't seem to particularly care about academics, and we do care about academics at Indiana. So that's why I think it was so devastating for people. And as you suggested, I was the 5th athletic director in 8 years. So you can't. These are good people, but you can't get any good momentum, with that. So just a fine point on that. When I got the job, I had a couple months before I actually started. So I talked to everybody and their brother trying to learn about it: regulators, donors, coaches, administrators, players, former players. And multiple coaches said to me, multiple IU coaches, sitting IU coaches said to me, why would someone who seems like they could be doing something else want to come here and do this? And that didn't scare me off, Alex, but it bummed me out, because for me, it's like, what's better? It's Bloomington, Indiana, the quintessential college town, IU, most beautiful campus in the country, kids, sports. It bothered me that people thought so little of the place, that we're living in it, leading it, coaching in it, that they wondered why I would want to come. And then I thought about their reality. Coach Knight firing was still fairly fresh. The Coach Hepner, awful death from glioblastoma. Then the Kelvin Sampson debacle, 5 athletic directors in 8 years. And so people were traumatized, and they didn't realize it. They were keeping their heads down, not coloring outside the lines. They were going to wait me out like every other person had come and gone. And that really was the genesis of our 5 priorities: 24 sports, 1 team, ultimately the Student Athlete Bill of Rights. Let's create esprit de corps. Let's be about something. Let's be a value-based organization. And I think that made a big difference.
You describe a culture, though, within the department when you get there, of people kind of walking around the office with their head down, not wanting to disrupt anything, and just kind of going about their business rather than being a connected unit. And one of the things I remember, I don't know how you talked about this in your book, but at one point, I think it was 2014 or 15, I came and interviewed you in your office, and you had obviously a sign on your door talking about, being everyone's welcome to, to come in. How did you go about kind of building that culture within the department of making everybody feel connected and being a part of a team? Because it sounded, quite frankly, depressing, the state of kind of the morale and different things behind the scenes. And it definitely seems like there was a lot of work to do. And it seems to me that was one of your biggest challenges upon immediately taking over the job.
Yeah, no, I think it was. And layer on top of that I think very understandably, a lot of coaches and others were like, what the hell does this guy have to add? He didn't play, he didn't coach. He's not out of the athletics industry, if you will. He's this like lawyer from Indianapolis. And, I'm not sure I like that. And it's pretty threatening if you think about it, for somebody outside of your profession, if you will, to come in at the very top and all of a sudden be in charge. I get that too. And I think people were, concerned about that. And I was aware of that. So I tried to do a lot of different things. So for one thing, as you may recall, I never wore a suit. I never wore a tie. I always wore a pullover or something like that. Now, that was awesome because I got to wear that every day, and I got the best stuff from Adidas, and that was awesome. It's like living every fan's dream with all that stuff. But it was purposeful too. I was trying to cut against this image of the lawyer from Indianapolis who had all the answers, And then I really tried, like you said, to be very accessible. So a quick story, and I mentioned this in the book. When I was talking to people, and especially people in the department, especially coaches, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but they almost everybody mentioned this thing where in the old AD's office in Assembly Hall, you'd come in and there was a locked door between the hallway and where you went into the athletic director's offices. And that just kind of pissed people off, and I think became a metaphor or a rallying flag of a lack of accessibility and a leadership team that was disconnected from the rank and file, And so my first day, January 1st, 2009, I called up Chuck Crabb, who some of your listeners may not know, is not only the voice of the Hoosiers, but he's the head of facilities for the athletic department, knows where every screw and every wire and everything is. He's incredible. And I said, hey, Chuck, take that door off. And he's like, what? I said, that locked door, take it off its hinges. I don't want it there anymore. And he goes, okay. And that sent an immediate good signal. I heard a lot back, like, the crazy ass took the locked door down. And then, like you indicated, I had a thing on the window that said, the athletic director can always be interrupted for a student athlete. And I meant it, and I was. And don't say that to kids if you're not ready for them to show up and expect to interrupt your meeting, because they did. And I let them do that. It used to be, and one of the things I learned from these interviews was, yeah, they had monthly coaches meetings, but it was basically the senior management team coming in, offloading information and demands, and then leaving. There was no conversation. I showed up for my first one. I had my legal pad and a pen, and I sat in the chairs and just talked to people. And that became very common. But at first, I hardly ever went with anybody else. It was me and the coaches. And also I would hear stuff from the front lines, like my people on staff might say, oh yeah, that's all fixed. Oh, that's fine. That's good. But the coaches would say, well, bullshit, it's not. And I could hear that from them and come back and say, guys, I think we've got a problem. This may not be as fixed as we think it is. And then every Wednesday morning, I had open office hours where the whole morning I didn't have anything on my schedule, and I invited coaches in, just come and shoot the breeze or whatever, which was, again, creating a direct pipeline to coaches and not be insulated by sport administrators or that sort of thing. I had a senior person on my team that I inherited said that when she got hired, the AD told her, I'm hiring you to take care of the sports I don't care about, which was basically everything other than football, men's basketball, and baseball. And that was felt throughout the department. So in some ways, you're managing and leading in the context of who you followed. And when you follow that kind of mentality, I think 24 sports, one team was sort of the antidote to that.
One of the great things that you did from a facility standpoint was not just focus. Obviously there's a lot of good things happening with the football stadium and the improvements that were made there, but you also focused on other sports, maybe the non-revenue sports. You looked at the baseball and softball facilities. You mentioned this in the book. I forget exactly which school it was, but you went to another Big Ten school and kind of saw what they were doing, and you came back to Bloomington and looked at yours and said, this can't be our reality. We have to fix these things. What kind of roadblocks did you run into when trying to upgrade all of the facilities that you did? And looking back on that, when you drive back into Bloomington now, is there any single project that you look at and say, I'm especially proud of being able to do that? Is there one that you look at and said, when I took over, I never thought that was possible, and sure enough, we did it?
Yeah, thanks for those observations, Alex. So I thought this during the search process, the interview process, and then it quickly became clear to me that this was really the situation that my role needed to be rebuilding IU athletics, both culturally, like we were talking about, people keep their head down, they're dysfunctional, creating some camaraderie, esprit de corps, and that part, and then just rebuilding the infrastructure. Because when you're in Bloomington, you walk around, you go, well, that looks that looks pretty legit, or that facility looks okay, and then you go around to the Big Ten and see what we're competing against, and it was a joke almost uniformly. I left as a senior in 1981, and the facilities when I came back in 2009 weren't much different. Sunbauer Field was maybe a high school quality field. The softball field was a middle school field. Wrestling and volleyball competed literally in a high school gymnasium. Even though the north end zone had been started, it had not been paid for. And it was essentially two concrete grandstands facing each other. It looked like Bowling Green or Carmel High School or Penn High School. Assembly Hall was almost literally falling apart. It was bad. And I felt like in order for us to be able to compete, we didn't necessarily need to be the Taj Mahal in any one of these things. I mean, we just didn't have the money that some other schools had, but we needed to be competitive. We needed to make sure, and the golf course, it's a complete joke. So we needed to be a place where facilities weren't the reason why a kid didn't come. And I did think that needed to be done across the board. In terms of roadblocks, I don't think there were any roadblocks in terms of people not wanting to do it, but there were plenty of challenges, and money being foremost among them. So the Big Ten money, the Big Ten basketball network money, football, basketball primarily, helped a lot. But most of that stuff was built with philanthropy, and I think something that I brought that wasn't really athletically related was in politics. I raised a lot of money, and civically, I raised a lot of money. We raised $20 million for the Super Bowl in 45 days in Indianapolis. So I'm shameless in asking people for money, and unabashedly so. And we raised a hell of a lot of money. Ultimately through the generosity of our donors, but a lot of aggressive fundraising, which we needed to do to compete. These statistics, Alex, but I'll repeat them quickly. In the Big Ten East Division, okay, against the teams we got to play. I hear these Western Division teams whine that we've got to play Ohio State and Michigan in 1 year. It's like, well, welcome to our world, where we play them every year. But in the division with the teams we're supposed to beat, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, each one of them makes more money in one football game than we make in an entire 7-game home schedule. So think about that for a minute. The last year, this was calculated under my watch. I don't know, it's 18 maybe. Michigan made the most money off football in the Big Ten at about $60 million, and we made the least at $6 million. Okay, so in a league where everything else is pretty much even, Steven, we share TV money and share bowl money and stuff like that. That's a big lead when you're outgunned 10-1 in funding. So part of the way we try to even that up is just raise a lot of money, because it's going to, and that's another reason why football is so important. As we have more sellouts, Cincinnati, Ohio State, hopefully going forward we do, that drops a lot of money to the bottom line to help even up that disparity. So the biggest thing we had to overcome was a lack of funding, but we did that primarily through philanthropy. I want to emphasize that while sometimes Michael McRobbie takes some lumps in the athletic conversation, he was a huge friend of IU athletics and really helped me cut through bureaucracy, get things done. He really embraced this idea of, let's have a bicentennial facilities plan. Let's use the bicentennial as a hook to get a lot of stuff done, which we did. We invested almost $1/3 billion in our facilities in just a decade, and used the pendency of the bicentennial as a way to get some of that stuff done. In terms of the thing I'm most proud of, I will say, that's like picking among your children, but I'm most proud of the South End Zone because primarily what goes on the inside there. So the outside is awesome. Closing the bowl. I sat there at the Cincinnati game, and wow, it was a very frustrating outcome. Every little corner of that place was full. It was a legit Big Ten full bowl experience. That bullshit link fence that had the barbed wire on top, was a distant memory. I remember touring the place with Dolson when I early got there, and they had that chain fence with the barbed wire on it when I was there as a kid. And I said to Dolson, "Is this to keep people out or to keep people in?" And it looked so trashy. But anyway, that's a fine point. But just the accoutrement of that stadium, I think, are really cool. And the south end zone is an important part of it. But what's inside is what's important. Every square foot of that place is for students. The nutrition center, health and wellness, rehab, getting jobs in the future, places where people practice their interviews on TV. And that is really important to me because, as you know, we wanted to focus on athletics, we wanted to focus on academics, but we also wanted to focus on the personal development of every student. And I think the south end zone is a testament to that priority.
You brought up the Michael McRobbie narrative that and this has not been advanced by me, but some in the media have advanced the narrative that he didn't care about athletics. And that's something you wrote extensively about in the book. Why did you feel it necessary to kind of write about that in the book? And where do you think the origin is of him, of this kind of perception that he maybe wasn't as committed to athletics as maybe some other presidents in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I decided to mention that because in the book and today, because conventional wisdom has a way of getting locked in pretty quickly, and I just think that's unfair with him. I was in meeting after meeting where he, dislodged a slow-moving bureaucrat or told me, "Okay, I know you're close on the funding. I've got your back on that. We'll figure that out." When I first met him, and he's a very intimidating guy, because he's big, barrel-chested. He's got that Australian accent. He's an academic. And all I knew about him was that he didn't want a guy that hadn't been AD before. And so I said, "Look, I just got two questions. Number one, does your commitment to excellence and all this other stuff extend to athletics? Because I got a good gig in Indy, and I could come down here and make sure the pots don't boil over, but I don't want to do that. I want to come down and do a bunch of stuff. And are you in?" And he goes, "I am." He said, "I'm an Australian swimmer. I'm quite competitive, blah, blah, blah." So I said, "Okay." And then I said, "Are you going to let me run the athletic department? Because you hear tales of donors and trustees." And I said, "It's not an ego thing, but if my name's on the door and you're going to expect me to run it, I need to have the keys. I'm running it." And he goes, "Absolutely." He said, "I got no interest in running this department. I've sort of run it for the last year, and I don't want to run it." And I bring that up because, man, he was true to his word. Every time I needed something or was kind of pushing, I'm a pusher. I was pushing to get things done. He really supported that, and our successes, I think, are his successes. Why he got the bad rap, I think part of it is he's a reserved person by nature, so he wasn't like a rah-rah guy. And then I think, like things happen sometimes, the whole funding of the international studies building irritated people. And so it's like, if we're so far behind in fundraising, why are you guys spending Big Ten money on academics? And I get that. Absolutely. The answer to that is it's actually not all that much money, because when you're paying debt service, it was $1 million-ish a year, which isn't nothing, but on a $110 million budget, it doesn't move the needle a ton. And frankly, the president made some other accommodations for us that really made that contribution fairly revenue neutral. And I think it sent a good sign about athletics supporting academics, that not only helped academics, it helped athletics. So again, I'm biased. He was my boss. He hired me. But I think he was a great friend of athletics.
The Assembly Hall renovation is another decision that you made that's controversial, because you have some in a camp that say, if you ever sat in the balcony of Assembly Hall, the views up there are not great. We needed to build a new building. You took the approach of, let's renovate the building, let's preserve this home court. I can see both sides of the argument. To me, going into Assembly Hall, I can still remember even before the renovation, some of those games where the 2011-12 season where, Cream started winning a lot of games, and then the following season, some of those atmospheres were, and I've been to a lot of the other Big Ten arenas, were second to none in the Big Ten. And I understood why you wanted to preserve that. How was there any discussion ever of, bulldozing eventually Assembly Hall and building a new arena, and why ultimately did you decide that keeping Assembly Hall and renovating it was the better decision?
Yeah, before I got there and after I got there, there was tons of conversation about scraping Assembly Hall and building a new arena. In fact, the Board of Trustees passed a resolution to that effect. It said something like, with all deliberate speed or as soon as possible, we'll tear down Assembly Hall and build a new arena. I mean, that was policy for the Board of Trustees. A lot of people don't know that Cook Hall was built where it was built with the idea that ultimately Assembly Hall would be torn down and the new arena would be directly in front of Cook Hall and connected with Cook Hall. In fact, to the point they spent, I think, multiple millions of dollars to remove utility lines that would be in the way of the new building. I mean, that's how far down the road it was. And my predecessor was very much in favor of scraping and rebuilding, and hired a consulting firm that do what consulting firms tend to do, which is come back and tell you what you want to hear, which is, hey, this would be a good idea to scrape it and build it. And I just didn't want to, I just thought that was wrong, and that was, it was hard to talk about roadblocks. There was a lot of momentum for the scrape and build. And I thought it was wrong, understandable, but wrong. And the reason for that is what you alluded to. I think Assembly Hall's the best home court in college basketball. And I get the bad seats in the balcony. I've sat in them. When I was a student, we had a huge upset win over Notre Dame, which I love because I hate Notre Dame. And I was in the very top row of the bottom and couldn't see the scoreboard. I had to run down 4 or 5 rows to see, what the hell was going on, how many seconds were left, and that sort of thing. So I get all that, but I'll tell you what, man, I just don't like those cookie cutter multi-purpose places, And I get why people build them, especially hockey schools, but you got Jennison Fieldhouse in Wisconsin. Now it could be, Anywhere Arena USA. You got St. John's, Ohio State. Now you got Anywhere Arena USA. Even at Michigan State, which is a pretty cool arena, or Jennison Fieldhouse in Michigan State. But all 3 of those schools built multi-purpose arenas, and it's like being in an NBA arena. So I put a huge premium on that. Plus, I thought it helped our program, and I think it does help our program. And if you had any doubt about that, compare our home record when Assembly Hall was empty to when Assembly Hall is full of people, and that shows what a home court advantage can do for you and does do for you. And then the other thing was the money. It would, if we were going to build an Indiana quality basketball arena, that's $300 million. We were able to renovate Assembly Hall for about $45 million. And as I say in the book, if you're going to mess with Mecca, you better not get it wrong, because it's in all our hearts, right? So the challenge was bringing it up to date, fixing all the behind the scenes stuff, but creating some of the external stuff that we needed. Gigantic scoreboard, replace all those seats, some premium seating, escalators to replace the ramps, so forth and so on. You get it. Just think about those seats, man. They've been in there for almost 50 years. Those cloth permeable seats. Can you imagine all the nasty stuff that's just leaked into those seats? It was gross. So I remember walking through the arena and listen to some of the carpenters and stuff, all local guys going, they got this place right, and the bathrooms, which were so nasty. So I'm biased, but I think we were able to preserve the best home court in college basketball, preserve the feeling of Assembly Hall, that you're in Assembly Hall, but bring it up to date. So it's a funner place to watch a game, and it'll last for a generation in terms of the infrastructure.
Kevin Wilson was a hire that you made early in your tenure. I think he did a lot of great things in terms of on-field performance for the football program. You wrote about that in the book. You also wrote about later in his tenure, before giving him the extension, kind of thoughts stewing through your head. Was this the right decision? Ultimately, you had to make the decision to move on and go with Tom Allen. I'm curious what kind of, what that was like, just going through kind of the end of Kevin Wilson's tenure. You obviously had to acknowledge the great work that he did in terms of wins and losses, but while also acknowledging that from a culture fit, maybe he was the wrong person to lead the program moving forward. How tough of a decision was that? And it sounded to me from what you said, it was something that you battled for a long part of his tenure, just kind of going back and forth and wondering if he was the right man to lead the program.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Alex, it was awful. Anytime you fire a coach, it's awful, because as the athletic director, you're pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into people. And, truth be told, especially Power Five, we're all Power Five, but especially your power coaches, your revenue sports, football and men's basketball, because the success of those programs is so vital to the entire department, So as the athletic director, you're pouring yourself into them. And a lot of times you're the only person that can tell them the truth, because they're sometimes surrounded by kind of sycophants and, fans tell them what they want to hear, and their colleagues tell them what they want to hear, and their staff tells them what they want to hear. And that's no fun to be the one to say, hey, have you thought about this? Or I'm not sure that makes sense. Of course, that's all behind closed doors. And sometimes the fans are like, how can you be such an idiot not to see this or that? And it's like, maybe I do. Maybe I'm handling it professionally, But when there comes a time after all that investment that you decide you've got to make a change, it's awful. And the coaches feel betrayed, because they're like, how could you be with me all this time and now you're firing me, And I get it. And it was especially hard with Kevin, because I liked him. He was a roguish, fun guy, and I think a very good person. Angie, his wife, was delightful, had a cool family. I liked him personally a lot. And I think professionally did a lot of great things for the program. I think he set the table for the success we had after. He had a lot of success himself. However many, bucket wins in a row, and, bowl games after we hadn't been to any for, 30 years, or 1 in 30 years or whatever. So it was hard, but I'm absolutely confident it was the right decision to make. It's no secret that our philosophical differences weren't new, that we had talked through a lot of things for a long time. I reveal in the book that I almost didn't renew his contract. I almost made a change the year before, but I thought we had resolved the philosophical differences. And when I found out I hadn't, then I had to make a change. But when I did the extension, it was a very school-friendly extension on purpose. So I know I was criticized for giving a guy a 6-year contract and then making a change. But what I think gets lost is that because of the nature of that contract, we were able to do that fairly painlessly.
Tom Crean situation was another one where I think there were, at least from the fan base, and obviously I don't cover football, but I have a much better, feeling on the pulse of the fan base with men's basketball. And it seemed like with Crean, the highs were obviously really high, and there was a lot of excitement when he had those moments where, the Christian Watford shot goes in, they win the Big Ten outright the next season at Michigan, they earn a number 1 seed in the tournament. Even the 2015-16 season, I would argue, I like to joke with people. I've been doing this since 2007, and Indiana's really only been good 3 times in basketball since I started my website. But 2015-16 to me, that Thomas Bryant, Yogi Ferrell team, that was a lot of fun because that was a team that I don't think a lot of people picked to win the Big Ten, but they went out, they did it on the road at Iowa, get that big win to clinch it. I think there was a lot of fun about that team, but it never seemed like he could sustain the success the following season. And then Indiana, the fan base, the standard that the fan base holds a coach to is maybe a little bit unfair because, Bob Knight, in terms of wins and losses, is the gold standard, not only at Indiana, but in college basketball. So I'm curious how, when you were evaluating Crean year to year and you kind of saw those ebbs and flows, how difficult did that make it for you on a year-to-year basis to decide what to do when he was winning Big Tens and then the next season, I mean, famously after the 2012-13 season, they lose to Syracuse and then he doesn't even make the postseason the next year?
Yeah, that's a great question, a great summary of kind of the tenure. One thing I want to underscore, and I don't know if people get sick of hearing this, but it's long enough ago. Some people may not even be truly aware of it. I will always feel indebted, and I hope IU fans always feel indebted to Tom Crean for the amazing job he did of getting us out of the abyss. So after Sampson leaves, he left some pretty good players. And when Tom was recruited, those players were still on the team. And, a lot had NBA careers and great careers other places. Well, they all left. So our best player is Kyle Tabor, who averaged like 1.2 points a game or something. And we're literally playing, baseball players and, guys that we found at the Hyper and people that just didn't belong in the Big Ten, let alone at Indiana. That's what Tom had to deal with. And I'm very serious about this. I'm not sure there's any other coach in America with the mentality and the willpower and the focus to not look back, accept the cards he was dealt, which weren't the cards he was told he was going to be dealt, and go through that brutal, 2 years of, just losing and not having the horses. And then recruiting the guys to get us out of it. Witness Cody Zeller, the head of that pack, to attract, blue chip guys to a program that was so down. Now, that's also a tribute to Indiana basketball and the tradition of Indiana University. But it's a tribute to Tom. And so that should get lost to history, man. I mean, what he did was extraordinary. And when the Watt shot went in, and I'm criticizing some quarters for making such a big deal about that because, it wasn't for a national championship and all that. I get all that. But in a single moment, we were relevant again. We went from being irrelevant to relevant, beating a number one ranked team at home. And that was a big, big deal. And Tom recruited the guys, blue chippers people expected him to get. And then he found guys that, nobody knew about and helped develop them into great, great players. So he gets Cody and he gets Yogi and people know about them, Thomas, but then he gets OG and Victor and those guys and builds them. So anyway, the point is, I think Tom did a great job, especially early in his tenure. As you said, had some great moments, 2 outright Big Ten championships in 5 years. 13, we were ranked number 1 for like 15 weeks or something, all that stuff. And if I believed that he was the right guy going forward, that would have been enough. Some people say, what do you expect? The guy's like, and that I agree with you totally about the 15 team to play Kentucky, beat them the way we did, have the good games, or give Kentucky the best game I think they had in their tournament. But Tom did some great things. Hell, he was Big Ten Coach of the Year before I fired him. So all that would have been enough if I believed that he was going to get us there. But I didn't believe he was going to get us there. And there, for me, is very tall cotton, man. I mean, I told the public, I want to perennially contend for the Big Ten championship. always go deep in the tournament and hang the sixth banner. I mean, that's the standard. And I didn't think Tom was going to get us there. So it wasn't about what he had done being not enough or enough or whatever. I had to make the decision about that. And as I talk about in the book, that was a very, very hard decision. I was very, very fond of Tom. I have a great deal of respect for Tom, still do. And I was really close to weaning out. I just fired Kevin. That was a bitch. I didn't like that, but I knew I needed to do it. And Tom had pulled the program out of the abyss, and he had just won the outright championship. And he did have to, or he was Big Ten Coach of the Year. But I had to, I'm the adult supervision. I'm the ultimate steward. And I believe then, I believe now, the right decision was to make a change. And so I did make the change. But I hope that doesn't sully the many contributions Tom made to Indiana basketball, because I think he made a lot of them.
I'll confess to the spring of 2017 when you hired Archie Miller. Indiana hired Archie Miller. Illinois hired Brad Underwood. Ohio State hired Chris Holtman. I thought Indiana made the best hire of the three. In retrospect, it doesn't necessarily bear out that way, and that, Indiana is no longer led by Archie Miller as its head coach. What do you think in, looking, and it's always easy in hindsight to say that was not the best decision, but what do you think you got right about that hire, and what ultimately do you think was wrong about the hire? For me, and I'll just tell you, this is my personal opinion. The one thing I never understood with Archie, and he was always cordial with the media, and didn't always seem to want to do media, but to me, I don't feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that he maybe understood kind of the pedestal that he was going to be placed on as the Indiana basketball coach, and all of the little things that came with that. I can remember a time when early in his tenure, it was a sectional or regional game when Romeo Langford was playing, and all these kids came up to him wanting pictures and autograph. He did it, but he didn't, do it with the enthusiasm that maybe I would have saw from a Tom Crean. It seemed to me that he always just wanted to coach the team and not necessarily do all the other things. Do you think that had anything to do with maybe his success at the program, not fully embracing kind of what everything the job entailed other than coaching basketball?
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. You asked me what was right and what was wrong. First of all, I'll tell you that based upon the same set of information, I would have done the same thing. So I don't know if that'll piss your listeners off or not, but I would hire him again based on where we were and where he was and my evaluation of him. I was attracted to him because of his basketball pedigree, his father, his brother. That stuff makes sense. The way he played. I love, Jim Delaney. One of his strengths is he's this pugnacious New Jersey point guard at heart. And Archie's a pugnacious 5'9" point guard who had a lot of success, in a big time conference. He had shown ability to develop players, succeed in the face of adversity. Some of those Dayton teams, he had a kid die on one of those teams. And he kept that team together and moved into the tournament. And I will tell you, one of the things I liked about him was he was all business. And he was a lunch bucket, all business, didn't really care about what music was played during timeouts. He cared about basketball. And that was attractive to me, and I thought would appeal to Hoosiers, but that would be a kind of a ancillary benefit. I thought that all business approach would be good, and I think there were really good parts of it. But I can't challenge the idea that sometimes our strengths are our weaknesses, and his humility. He really was like, why do people care about me? It wasn't being aloof. It was sort of the ultimate humility, which I thought endearing. And it's like a lot of things. If you win, it's endearing, and if you lose, there's something wrong with it, because it all comes down, to whether you win or not. Now, what went wrong? One of the great things about retiring is I don't have to think about that, and I really don't. I loved being AD every day, including my last day. It was awesome, man, especially being involved with the kids, but every part of it. I loved every part of it. Having said that, I told Scott, and I'm thrilled Scott's there. He was my guy. I pushed for him. I think he's doing a great job. And I told him, look, I'm not going to be underfoot. If you want to call me, I'm there all the time, but I'm not going to be bugging you. And I think I've held up my end of the deal on that. He's held up his end. He calls me once in a while. I try to tell him, what I can. But I love not having to make those decisions, and I love not having to evaluate that. And so, Scott made his decision. I've got confidence in his judgment, and I don't revisit that. And so I'll leave it to other people to decide, if it went wrong and how it went wrong and why it went wrong. I will, but I absolutely own hiring him. I'd do it again. And, maybe under some different circumstances, there may have been different results. But it is what it is.
So the book is now available for those who would like to go to Amazon and pick it up. And you're, correct me if I'm wrong, back to practicing law in Indianapolis. What's next for Fred Glass other than spending time with grandchildren, maybe not having to think about what's happening on a day-to-day basis with IU athletics is probably healthy after the amount of time that you spent kind of being in, it is a fishbowl because every move that you make is evaluated, picked apart, tweeted about by people like me and others in the media. Hopefully we were fair enough to you over your time in Bloomington, but I'm just kind of curious, like what's next for you and kind of just update us on what you've been doing now since you left your post in Bloomington.
Well, first of all, Alex, I really appreciate being on the show, and all you guys are always super fair to me. And one of the things about IU fans generally, and it's also reflected in the beat writers that write about it, you guys are super knowledgeable about sports. You can't bullshit. You guys, you know the game, and we may disagree on this or that, but the fundamental knowledge of the game is there, and the respect was always there. I always enjoyed interacting with you guys, and felt like you're always super fair to me. What's next is I'm practicing law here at the Taft Law Firm in Indianapolis. I like working on big projects. I've got some big projects going on. I'm representing the Indy 11 in pursuing a new stadium in downtown Indianapolis, which I think could be super cool. Our Circle Center Mall, our downtown mall, is tired, and I'm representing the city of Indianapolis on renovating that mall, which could be a huge economic engine for Indianapolis. And so that's the kind of cool stuff I like to do. I am enjoying the grandkids. I'm enjoying watching the games as a fan again, and not as somebody that's got to deal with the aftermath and all that. And I will tell you that the games started not being fun for me. They were always really fun. As a fan, they were fun, but they started to be more of a just kind of wear on me, and that's not right. And that's part of the reason I was like, I think that's a signal that I've probably been here long enough. But I'm loving watching the games. Watched the soccer game yesterday. Roman's ridiculous 4-goal block. That's the kind of stuff that's fun to watch. I'm glad the Mike Woodson era got off with a win. One thing, after going through the first 2 years with Tom Crean, I will never ever feel bad about a win. We had like 5 wins, and that's what Tom said. He goes, "Hey, one lesson from this is, man, there are no bad wins. You win, it's awesome. It's hard to win." So I loved, seeing the Hoosiers win that first game, and so I'm having fun practicing law and kind of doing things at my own pace.
Do you ever have the itch to get back into politics at all, or is that past? Is that in the rear view for good?
Yeah, that's in the rear view. I when I was a kid, I wanted to run for something. I thought it'd be fun to be governor or something like that. So the 12-year-old Fred Glass would be very disappointed in 62-year-old Fred Glass, who has no interest in any of that. I stay a little involved as kind of a kitchen cabinet advisor. I like doing that. It's kind of like being a grandfather. You can play in it, and then you don't have to really deal with it. So I'll do that, but I'll never run for anything or any of that.
Fred, thanks for the time. I feel like probably could have talked about the book for 3 hours. I was looking at my notes here on the side. There's a lot of other things I had marked down to talk to you, but maybe we can catch up again down the road. Again, you can pick up the book, Making Your Own Luck from a Skid Row Bar to Rebuilding Indiana University Athletics. I found it on Amazon.com. So Fred, once again, thanks for the time, and appreciate you being more than generous with us today with that.
That's awesome, Alex. Thanks for having me on. I'd love to be on again to talk more about the book, and I appreciate your generous comments very, very much. Thanks a lot.
All right, everybody. We'll be back once again next week with another episode of Podcast on the Brink. Until then, we'll talk to you next week.